Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller, joined today by an awesome progressive from the great state of Washington, Beth Doglio. How you doing, Beth?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me today, Eric.
Thanks for taking some time to chat with me. Just to flesh out your introduction a little bit, endorsed by Bernie Sanders, Pramila Jayapal, Elizabeth Warren, Sunrise Movement, Sierra Club, Future Generations PAC, League of Conservation Voters, Bill McKibben, which is a big one, Khanna, bunch of labor unions, nurses, firefighters, a who's who, all listed on your website, which I'll pull up and share, BethDoglio.com. As with all my candidates that I feature, you do not take corporate PAC money. And your opponent once upon a time said that, but has reversed course on that, which we will get into. And your history a little bit. You're currently a state rep in Washington, co-founder of Win with Women, long history of activism, community organizing, particularly focused on the environment, 30 plus years, just absolutely incredible work. And thank you for that heretofore. But let me, and we'll get into some of your policy, and I will let you talk. Sorry, I'm rambling in a long intro, but what's the state of the race as it looks now? Do you have a sense of it?
Well, we're 12 days out, and yeah, I think things are going great. I mean, we have like 60 people on the phones every night. It's really exciting. We've made over 200,000 calls. We're getting literature out into key neighborhoods. We're doing all kinds of text banking. I'm on air with a great ad that has some contrasts between us and also talks about me being a working families champion and a champion for universal health care. I think things are going great. I don't know we're not leaving anything on the table. Let's put it that way. But it's a D on D race. It really is, the path to progressive policy really lies in districts like these. This is a safe Democratic district, and whomever we elect this year is likely to hold this seat for some time to come. And we have an opportunity to elect a progressive Democrat or a corporate Democrat. Yeah. And let's not waste this seat on a corporate Democrat.
Hear, hear. Yeah, well said. And I will get into that with her. Since you mentioned the working families component of it, can you just talk about, some of the, you tick all the boxes on progressive policy. Just talk about that a little bit. Family medical leave, unions, living wages.
Yeah. Well, I've been a longtime advocate and ally with labor. Dating back to my I was the first executive director of Washington Conservation Voters way back in 1991, and working together with, labor unions at the political level, really making sure we were targeting legislators where we were putting our resources, making sure they were both good on the environment and on labor issues. I worked with the Blue-Green Alliance on opposition to TPP. Of course, we don't want our trade policies to weaken our environmental and our labor standards, and any trade agreement that we make needs to make sure and uphold the good standards that we have put in place around environment and labor standards. So have been a strong voice on trade issues. And then I sat on the Labor and Workforce Standards Committee as a representative. I've been a rep for the last 4 years in the state legislature. And I passed a bill that expands organizing opportunities for part-time public employees. 70% of them are women, and often part-time people are paid a little bit less. So this gives public employees in our state the opportunity to organize for better wages and better working conditions. Work with our firefighters to improve their health care. That's why I have a lot of firefighter support. All of the firefighter unions, I think there's 10 or 11 of them in the district, all of them endorsed, and of course at the international level as well.
That's wonderful. On that state level, on the labor fight at the state level, Amazon has headquarters in Washington State. Is that like a ground zero fight against, the richest man on the planet in terms of labor rights? What's that look like?
Well, you know how Amazon employees are treated. What's their median salary is $30K. They weren't given proper PPE. They've had a very high incidence of COVID. I will, hats off. At least the companies did start talking about that openly. They should have talked about it months ago, but at least they are talking about that openly now. And, it is ground zero in terms of trying to take some of our progressive elected bodies, like the Seattle City Council. They spent an unprecedented $1.5 million to try and make the Seattle City Council less progressive. And my opponent was the head of the CEO of the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, and she was at the head of that plan, taking that money and trying to flip seats. Luckily, they weren't successful. Of the 7 seats that they dumped all that money into, only 2 won, and one of them was really also supported by labor. So a failed attempt at trying to take over the Seattle City Council to not pay their fair share of, around housing, around transportation, so many things. We've got so many riches in this state, and we have the most regressive tax system in the country, because we have behemoths like Amazon that just will not allow tax policy to pass that really, makes them pay their fair share.
Yeah. Yeah. And they buy candidates, they buy seats, right? And,
well, they tried to buy it, but they didn't win that last time. So
right on. And this time they're not going to win either in Washington.
No, I hope not.
Right? Let me pull up the district real quick, just to, I like to give candidates an opportunity to brag on your district. Tell me what's great about Washington's 10th.
Oh my gosh, I love it. It is beautiful here. I was just out in Shelton, which is on the most western part of the district. It's a small timber resource community town, and I was going out. There was a state legislative candidate. We're doing a little bit of sign waiting this morning in the freezing cold at 7 a.m. And we just were like, we went past this beautiful, it's kind of at the bottom of the sound. You can see that water, and it was foggy and just gorgeous. And it's just beautiful. So we do sit that you can see the Puget Sound. It kind of has fingers that come into our district that really we're kind of at the top or the bottom of the sound, depending on how you look at it. And lots of natural resources and beautiful spaces. Also, Joint Base Lewis McChord is fully encompassed within the 10th Congressional District, so it does have a large active military and veteran population. We need to do a better job of making sure that our active military and veterans have access to housing, education, employment, and healthcare. Very important, because a lot of people come out here to work at JBLM and then end up staying here because of the sheer beauty of this district. But this district has just a little bit of everything: some urban, rural, suburban, very diverse, couple of colleges in it. It has a little bit of Tacoma, which is a major urban center, and then it's got Olympia, which is the state capital. So, and then it reaches out to Yelm and some of those communities, Puyallup, which has just got this really vibrant downtown, very, very lovely district.
Amazing. Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about Joint Base, and that's how on top of it you are. You already knew to hit that. Yeah, and a special consideration with that constituency.
Yeah, I was lucky to get to go out actually and have I asked for a briefing and a tour of Joint Base Lewis McChord, and I was accommodated, and I learned a tremendous amount about sort of many of the federal budget issues, that you wouldn't necessarily think about that come along with having that as well. And one other thing I should say is it is home to the Squaxin Island, the Nisqually, and the Puyallup. All 3 of those tribes are supporting my campaign because of my strong work with them over the years, partnering with tribes throughout the state.
Amazing. I'm going to ask you about that. You're killing on my questions, Beth.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I think it's awesome. While I'm here, I'm just teasing you. While I'm here, BethDoglio.com is your website. I'd be remiss if I didn't share it. I think this picture is awesome, by the way. Join Beth. You can sign up here. Biggest thing here would be to donate, right? So it's a grassroots campaign. Your challenger, who is also a Democrat, a corporate Democrat, does take corporate PAC money, whereas you do not, right? So, if you can make a donation, do so here. $5, $10, $100, whatever you can do. We're in the final stretch, and this is Beth's policy is uncompromised, unbought, Green New Deal full-throated, Medicare for all full-throated, right? There's no parsed words. So she needs our help to do so. Which kind of brings me to one thing that I wanted to show sort of as a contrast. And so on your website, and all your endorsements are listed there, the plenty of them. In your platform, you have, and I'm just pulling this up for demonstrative purposes, right? A proven leader on climate change. If I click through that, you say Green New Deal explicitly, right? Healthcare as a human right. Explicitly, you say pass Medicare for all and ensure universal health care coverage, right? You can't say it's a right and then say people have to buy it, right? Whereas your opponent's site says universal health care is a human right, and then it has that consultant wishy-washy language, accessible, affordable, reliable health care, whereas yours is Medicare for all, pass it, universal guarantee, right? So if you're in the district, like this is calculated consultant tested language, right? They sort of parse the words to gaslight you, basically, right? So just talk about what Medicare for all would mean for your district, especially during a pandemic.
Well, Medicare for all would mean that every single person would have access to healthcare, period, right? It means that our system of having employment tied to healthcare, or healthcare tied to healthcare tied to employment, would go away.
Right.
We wouldn't have that anymore. We would have one system, all this in-network, out-of-network, surprise billing. We would have one network with really clear billing. And the way that we pay for that, we're already paying 2/3. The government is already paying 2/3 of our healthcare costs by funding Medicare and Medicaid. And then they're also giving incentive payments to insurance companies, to private insurance companies. So that's 2/3 of it. And then, if we just cut down all those things that we get in mail, for those of us who are lucky to have healthcare, right, we know that we get all kinds of things coming in the mail all the time about pre-authorization. You have this much less that you can spend, blah, yeah, all this. That is administrative overhead that no other industrialized country has. We could cut our costs by 30% just in administration if we move towards a streamlined Medicare for all system that is one network. So that's what it means. It also means that my friend who had laryngeal cancer and ended up with they have good insurance, $10,000 of additional costs that they weren't expecting. What did they do? Just like so many other people do. They went on to GoFundMe and did a GoFundMe campaign to pay for their healthcare costs.
Yeah.
It means that my friend wouldn't have to do a GoFundMe campaign, that he could have thought more about getting healthy, about healing himself, about moving through the cancer, dealing with the treatment, than having to worry about that $10,000 of extra costs in a GoFundMe campaign. Yeah. We got to change this. It's not okay how we're, my husband is actually a family physician. And, I said to him, what is happening with your clients, your patients now that don't have health insurance, that are what happens to them? He says, well, if they're a diabetic, for example, they're supposed to come in every 3 months to get a check. They sort of drag that out. Maybe it's 6 months or 9 months before they come back in. And in fact, the statistics bear that out. 30% of people put off healthcare last year because they were afraid they weren't going to be able to pay for it. Yeah. So we can do better, Eric. We're the richest nation in the world. We can do better. The problem is that 1% of the population has 40% of the wealth.
Yeah.
And they need to be taxed at a higher level, period.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I wanted to highlight that specifically because the contrast is very clear, but her site is worded in such a way, just to straight up be deceptive, right? To be misleading, right? Someone that half pays attention hears you both say, oh, healthcare is a human right. It's equal, right? But it's not, right? She takes corporate PAC money where you do not, right? Her plan is a public option, would maintain the system that you just described. In her system, your friend would still have to do the GoFundMe, right?
Well, and not only that, she talks about the 20 million people that the Affordable Care Act has gotten healthcare for, but she never talks about the 87 million people who are un or underinsured right now.
Right. That's
You know,
pre-pandemic number. Yeah.
never talks about it. She never talks about income inequality ever. I've never heard those words come out of her mouth ever. You know, so anyway.
Yeah. So
But she's had to hear me say it over and over again. So maybe it's sinking in.
maybe. So her name is Marilyn Strickland. That's your challenger. And she, I guess earlier had said she was not going to take corporate PAC money, and then reversed that when she got into the general. In the primary, it was a top 2 race, and there were 19 candidates, and you guys were 1 and 2. And, you know, like you said, right at the top, it's a legit progressive unbought, unbossed, authentic, you know, servant of the people, right? Versus, you know, someone that takes corporate PAC money. You know, which is from Boeing, Pfizer, Weyerhaeuser. I saw that she voted against the Citizens United amendment in her former mayoral role.
Right.
You know, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, you know, the city council, like many city councils across the country, did a resolution to, you know, to send to Congress to say, please, you know, we need to end Citizens United. And she basically said, I can't vote on that. I'm about to run for office. It seems hypocritical. I'm going to have to ask people for money. Well, she could still ask people for money. She could just not ask corporations for money. It's that simple. And in fact, you know, it was a plan all along. She knew that if she took corporate money, I mean, she comes out of the corporate world. She was the CEO of the Seattle Chamber of Commerce, representing businesses, which is in itself, you know, okay, but you're going to take corporate money if that's sort of what you do. And so she, you know, put in her campaign prospectus the fact that she wasn't taking corporate money in the primary. And then the day of the primary election, she took money from the Chamber of Commerce. It was a total plan. She knew all along, I knew all along for that matter, that she was going to take corporate money in the general, because she knew that she couldn't keep up with me if she only took money from individuals. Because I was out raising her when it was just individuals. So I outraised her in the primary. She had to loan herself $50,000, which I don't think she's paid that back to herself yet. So she knew that, and she says she's open about it. She's like, I need to have the resources to win this race.
Yeah.
You know, I can't do it without corporate money.
Yeah, I remember in the
that last part.
Right. Well, I was going to say, I remember in the 2016 cycle, Sarah Silverman said a great line. She said, you know, Bernie Sanders in that race proved that, you know, taking corporate PAC money isn't a necessary evil. It's just an evil, right? Which I thought was a great line. So, you know, again, BethDoglio.com does not take corporate PAC money. She needs our help, right? Make a donation, right? You know, we have less than 2 weeks to go.
And I still am raising money. I have not met my entire budget goal. And so, you know, I need to stay on the air. I need to be able to make the contrast between myself and her in order to win this. My ad does a really good job of doing that. Also talks about how it is crystal clear with COVID, how important our essential workers are, and that I am a champion, really will focus on policies that lift working people up, like paid family and medical leave, increasing the minimum wage, Medicare for all. These are all policies that provide that social safety net that families and individuals need in order to thrive, not just survive.
Hear, hear. Yeah, and you know, to make that even more a finer point on that, you're endorsed by Pramila Jayapal. I'm assuming if and when you make it into the House, you will support her Medicare for all bill. You would vote for it.
Oh yeah, I'm like I didn't text her at one point. Can I be number 2 on your bill? She's like, no, sorry, that's reserved already.
Right. Whereas your opponent would not. She's probably going to be paid to obstruct that. Right. So, yeah. But enough about her. Usually I'm talking about how terrible.
Well, I mean, she's taking money from health insurance companies.
Right.
Which, you know.
Right. So yeah. So she would vote against that bill.
Of course, they're going to support her. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You mentioned the tribal nations. I think that's interesting. Can you talk about? You know, you have a long history of, you know, aligning with them, advocating with them, partnering with them, you know, and there was one in particular that I saw, Coastal Zone Management Act, which I thought was interesting. Can you talk about just, you know, you don't have to go through the laundry list. It's on your website, BethDoglio.com, but just a few bullet points of what you've done with the tribal nations in your district and what you would do. Well, the most important thing that
I'm most proud of is our work together to stop 7 coal export facilities that were proposed here up and down the West Coast, dead in their tracks. Several of the facilities would have been were proposed to be sited on sacred land to our Native neighbors, community members. And together we partnered, the environmental community. I led the campaign called Power Pass Coal. And we partnered with the tribes to stop them all from coming to fruition. And that also then turned into work around other massive fossil fuel projects, oil transport facilities, fracked gas, the methanol plant that was proposed in Tacoma when Mayor Strickland was, when Maryland was the mayor of Tacoma. The community it was a complete organic grassroots uprising in Tacoma that basically said, yeah, we're not interested in siting the world's largest methanol plant in the midst of an urban community. So I'd done a lot of work there. And then as a legislator, I worked this last year with them on the sports betting bill. I was a strong proponent from the beginning and never wavered. I integrated some language into a community solar bill that I passed that helped tribes actually be their own administrator, because they are nations and they, should be able to put solar, be an administrator of a community. I mean, it's kind of a wonky thing, but it was a great little thing that we did together this last session around community solar. And of course, making sure that we have adequate and growing dollars going into protecting our natural resources, something that I value, as do our tribal nations in this state.
Amazing. Yeah, you say that in a slightly self-effacing way that's wonky, but that's exactly, who should be representing us in the House, right? So, again, anyone watching this, do you want Beth going over that language, or do you want someone who's taking corporate PAC money from a fossil fuel company going over that language, right? Making it literally, intentionally obtuse or whatever, right? So, kudos to you on all that fine work. Let me ask you about, some of the, I guess there are some rural areas in your district as well. Talk about how you would fight for investment, to sort of improve, probably the declination of rural areas in your district.
Yeah, well, Shelton, I was just out in Shelton today. I mean, I think a lot of what the Shelton is both has resource extraction industry, which I believe that our forestry and timber companies are part of the solution to climate change, right? Trees suck carbon from the air. And if we can move towards more carbon-friendly forestry management and incentivize keeping trees, growing longer, because the longer they grow, and before they're cut, the more carbon they're sucking out of the air. So I think climate policies absolutely have to take that into account and really think about, how do we incentivize that? How do we incentivize farmers to actually do soil sequestration and that whole science around how soils can also be a carbon suck? How do we incentivize that work? Because right now we're sort of at loggerheads. People are very threatened. People, the resource extraction industry and the agricultural industry is very threatened by climate policy. So how do we build the table and sit down together and figure out what is it that farmers and resource extraction, particularly the timber industry, need to kind of help us move forward, because they're essential. It is one system. It is a symbiotic system. And unless we're all working on this together, we are not going to solve our climate issues. But then the other thing is just small businesses generally. I mean, small towns and rural towns are being hit very hard, just like the urban areas in this pandemic. And so how do we keep those small businesses that are struggling to survive right now? And it's unconscionable that the Senate has not acted on the HEROES Act or any kind of a stimulus package. They're more concerned about, Amy Coney Barrett, getting, taking over the Supreme Court and putting into motion years and years and years of a 6-3 majority on the court. Oh my gosh, let's not go there. rather than really figuring out how to get capital into the hands of people in small communities that are going out of business. So I think there's a lot of stimulus. I have a vision of a recovery package that, helps rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, puts people back to work, rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, builds out our clean energy economy, builds affordable housing, efficient affordable housing, and also provides universal broadband. So there's another thing for our rural communities. We're all of us are pretty, not all of us are at a disadvantage. Certainly our rural communities are at a disadvantage around universal broadband. So that is something we really need to get busy and make happen. And COVID has made that very clear.
Hear, hear. Boy, I love that you talked about sort of the logging industry being a partner in progressing climate change policy. Yesterday, I had Audrey Denny on, who's running California's first, and she has a background in farming and agriculture, and she made almost the same case that you made about partnering with them, right? And it just got me thinking. We have Beth, Audrey, JD Schulten in Iowa. We have people with a farming background in the House working on climate change policy. Unbought, God, we would be so blessed. So BethDoglio.com, go donate, volunteer an hour, 2 hours, send some texts, make some calls. Let me ask about, the Green New Deal is, just to phrase it that way, versus your challenger. She, if you look at her climate policies, like, oh, we got to get back in the Paris Climate Accord, right? It's that half measure language, whereas, your full throat a Green New Deal. Talk about the urgency that is not enough, right? And maybe even how are you going to fight that, should you make it to the House floor? Because that's probably the more common position is the half measure, right? So how are you going to be fighting for the Green New Deal should you make it to the floor?
Well, first of all, I'm super excited to be endorsed by AOC and Senator Markey, the two authors of the Green New Deal. Yeah. Super exciting. I'm really excited to work with them and to learn from them about how to navigate and how we're going to sort of move this vision, which I think, what is not to like about it, right? Like, what is not to, I wish that I had asked that question. I've had some opportunities to question my opponent. What's not to like about it? Like, we want to see an intersectional approach to solving climate change, making sure that our frontline communities have the first opportunity at education and jobs around building out our clean energy economy. Those marginalized communities which have borne the brunt of climate pollution, of air pollution, water pollution, they get the first crack. So we start there, right? And then we're focused on really, making sure that those jobs are good family union jobs, and we're lifting people out of poverty by moving forward on a vision that our kids and their kids and need in order to have a safe planet to live on. So I think it's really important to I have experience working in the room with the stakeholders, working with the advocates, whether that be labor advocates, communities of color, or environmentalists, really coming together, the business community, the utilities, to figure out how do we do policy that actually makes the Green New Deal vision a reality. In Washington State, I've been part of helping move the 100% clean electricity bill. It actually integrates equity and labor standards into that bill so that people in those communities see themselves, and ultimately even our utilities got on board with the bill. And so together, we are working now through an energy strategy committee that the bill actually outlined to make that bill come to life, to move us towards 100% fossil-free electricity by 2030 with credits, and then by 2045 completely. Super exciting. We can do that across the country. It would be so exciting. And then once you do that, you bring on the transportation and you bring on your buildings onto that clean electric grid as well. So I think that, we need to continue to articulate that vision to people. And, I clearly have been on the campaign trail articulating that as much as possible, and to hope that people understand that there's nothing here to fear, right? There's nothing here to fear. This is a vision that would make us better. as a nation.
Yeah. Let me ask about the framing of that. Like, how is that? Because typically, I don't get a lot of Democrat versus Democrat races, right? And obviously, we made the difference. She's a corporate Democrat, right? But oftentimes, obviously, the right wing propagandizes Green New Deal, and they fearmonger AOC and hate her and all the sexism, et cetera, right? If you're trying to win over, sort of corporate Democrat voters, have they internalized that similar propaganda? And and if so, like, how do you reach them?
Well, I think that there's a lot of people who distrust corporations, regardless of, actually a lot of moderate Republicans and Republicans, really look out and distrust corporations. They don't necessarily, they have profits is the heart of what they are after versus, really being about putting people first. That's not necessarily, and people work in those systems. They are part of that. And so I think that what's internalized is the fact that what the system that we have right now really isn't working. And I think figuring out what the path forward and how you go on that path, I think that's where, we tend to diverge, right? And so I think we just need to continue to put forward a vision that is about moving away, particularly now. I mean, corporations are making money hand over fist right now, and people are really frustrated about that. They're frustrated that corporations took advantage of the CARES Act monies, right? Like, that's really a frustrating thing when you are a small business owner trying to just hold on for dear life. That's a frustrating thing. So I think that's where I've been trying to steer people, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. Great answer. And it's all people centered, right? So, it starts with the people, like you said, with the workers and, the just transition. I think the propaganda is all based on fear. You know that, we all see that. Great. Well, let me ask before we go, I don't want to close on an ad, just a quick 30-second ad that you put out. But anybody else on your slate or in your area, in your district that you're running with that you want to make mention of?
In terms of at any level?
Any level.
Any level. There is a woman running for Thurston County Commissioner, Carolina Mejia. She is a young AOC-like person who she was born in Mexico, but she basically dealt with birtherism from the Republican Party. Oh. And I am very proud of her for working through all of that. Of course, there were no grounds to their accusations about her, but it was a very challenging, emotionally challenging issue for her. Ends up she's running against someone who had young women come forward and say that he was very, inappropriate with them. And I'm pretty sure she's going to win, but I've been very proud of her. And her name is Carolina Mejia. And then there's also Michael Stedman, who is taking on Gary Edwards, who's been a county commissioner and has really not been a very constructive county commissioner. And I'd really like to see those two win the Thurston County Commissioner race. And then, of course, my Darcy Huffman and Colton Myers are running in the 35th Legislative District. And I would just love for them to see those two Democrats, fairly rural area, very difficult district, pretty Republican. But I think those Democrats, this is the year they can do it. And I'm super excited about them.
Amazing. Is there a clear divide in the Washington State House between corporate Democrats and progressives?
That's an interesting question. Yes, I'd say so. I'd say there are more progressive Democrats than there are corporate Democrats, but there's a really interesting race. State Senator Mark Mullet is being challenged by a Democrat, Ingrid Anderson, in the 5th Legislative District. And Mark is a corporate Democrat and has stood in the way of several key issues, particularly around our tax code and trying to make it more progressive. And labor is putting a lot of energy into trying to unseat him this year. And of course, the business community is dumping a lot of money into trying to protect that seat. So that is playing out in a state legislative district as we speak.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, every vote matters, top to bottom, right? Obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's even dog catcher. Got to have good dog catchers.
Right. I've never voted for a dog catcher.
I don't think I have either, but I guess some states do have them. I don't know.
I would be so excited if I went into a booth and there was a dog catcher candidate. I'd be like, yes, I get to vote for dog catcher finally. Well, Beth, it's been a pleasure to chat with you. Like I said at the beginning, thank you for all your advocacy work, to date. Thank you for running. Thank you for, being unbought and taking this message, taking this fight in a safely blue district. It's one of those rare opportunities where, people don't have to vote for, the lesser of two evils. They can vote for the greater good, right? So, it's a safe blue district. Who would you want fighting for you more? Someone who's authentic and passionate about the policy for its positive benefits, or someone who's paid to obstruct, right? Clear decision, clear distinction there. So BethDoglio.com, again, make a donation, small, large, offer to volunteer, help out. We have
absolutely. We have phone banks, phone banks. You can volunteer virtually for anybody.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I keep saying on these, Jamie Harrison has a mountain of money. He doesn't need your $20, right?
I keep saying that too, as a matter of fact.
Right? Send your $20 to Beth Doglio, right?
I absolutely say that. Right? Very well resourced. Those Senate candidates at this point, I don't know how they're going to spend all that money. I am not that well resourced. I will spend the money well. It is a high impact gift at this point.
Yeah. And imagine another true progressive in the House, Beth, in Washington's 10th. So Godspeed. I can't wait to talk to you again and call you Representative Doglio. I look forward to that day.
Yeah. Awesome.
I'm going to close out on an ad here. Do you have any final thought before we go?
I would say we are not going to get these 12 days back. There's 12 days to go. We are not ever going to get them back. So use them wisely. Invest in candidates. You can save money after November 3rd. So invest in candidates that you care about. We need more progressive members in the House in order to get progressive policy done. So I would use these 12 days, donate, volunteer. Don't look back and say, left something on the table. Beth lost by 4 votes. I could have been phone banking for her. Please do everything you can for any candidate, any progressive candidate across this nation. We need to take our nation back. And that involves each and every one of us putting some time in.
Hear, hear. Amazing. Well said. Thank you, Beth. Good luck.
All right. Yeah.
This is Beth.
And this is Beth.
Beth Doglio.
For decades, she's led the fight on clean air and water.
Now Beth is running for Congress.
She's endorsed by labor, nurses, and firefighters.
Because Beth gets things done.
We need good paying jobs with family-based benefits. We need a growing middle class, and we need it now.
I'm Beth Doglio, and I approve this message.